coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 781. Garry and Richard are both here. We've got lots to talk about. We'll be talking about Android apps on Windows 10. Microsoft are changing the way they're delivering features to Windows 10. We'll be talking about that. We've got some smart home news, Alexa stuff. We've got all sorts. So let's get straight to Garry and Richard. Richard and Garry, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And 1st of December as we record this on Tuesday evening, so we're in the Christmas month now. You can officially listen to your Christmas music and that kind of thing now.
Yeah. I mean, crikey, I'm not quite sure this whole buying Christmas trees early thing that's happened though. That seems to be excessive.
Yeah, it does.
But humbug.
Yeah,
indeed.
We always get a real tree, but you can't get a real tree in November and expect it still to be looking nice on Christmas Day.
Just get a dead tree and spray it green. Have done with. That's fine.
Yeah, that's it. So I got my Christmas albums out today, and I've got the lights up in my office here tonight, especially for you, Richard, the flashing lights. Yeah, so you're allowed to now. We're into December now, but well, that's not what we're here to talk about. We've got plenty of things to talk about tonight. We've got lots of Windows news, some flight sim news, some ARM. We're going to talk a bit about that. We did talk about last week, but we can mention that again, and lots of other things to talk about as well. So where should we start this evening? Oh, this one, put it in the rumour column, but it's an interesting point of discussion. I did see a few rumours that Microsoft were looking, this may sound familiar, to bring Android apps to Windows 10 with a thing called Project Latte.
Oh, yeah.
This sounds vaguely familiar, this.
Yes. Certainly those of us who remember the heydays of Windows and mobile may well be stroking a chin in recognition of this one. And also, to be frank, in more modern times, I know some of the Windows subsystem for Linux team were also involved in projects to sort of bring Android apps across. So yes, it's tech that I think the Microsoft's had rumbling around for a while, and it almost feels as though they need somebody higher up to press a button to say go. And this almost feels like they kind of somebody within Microsoft is pitching this through various outlets to say, here's a thing that we can do. Shall we do it? I think it's interesting. Potentially, I don't know. I mean, Garry, you're a developer. Do you think that the landscape has shifted enough to allow this sort of thing to happen? Because if you were to allow Android apps to run natively on Windows, taking aside the Google Play Store, where does that leave things like WinUI and whatever else if these are apps that are going to come across?
It's a very interesting one. I know the reason it didn't happen before was developer pushback, and not just external developers, internal developers as well. Internal people in Microsoft were a little bit anti the idea that they would lose control of the marketplace. It's a difficult one. I mean, it certainly is now getting to the point where there are apps that people need which they cannot run on Windows because they're only available on Android and iOS. And I think it's actually the switch away. We were chatting away the other week about the old iTunes problem on the Surface RT, and it's almost a reverse of that now. That the programs that people want to run are the ones they run on their phones and the like, and some sort of banking apps and things like that are only available, are not necessarily available on Windows these days. So it's an interesting one whether you go that way. Certainly, again, I think you're still going to get some pushback from developers, but the problem is that there's actually not that many developers developing Windows these days.
Well, not Windows desktop apps. There's been because the goalposts have moved considerably, and of course, as you say, what's the point? Because most apps really are phone or tablet first now. So, what would be the point? Whereas, as Microsoft will quite happily say, they'd much rather you're writing the back-end services on their cloud. What runs on the desktop? Well, stick it through a browser.
The story is that this project would use the WSL, the Windows subsystem for Linux.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense
because they've done a lot of good work with that, and they've got GUI support coming soon as well, haven't they, on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it's GUI for Linux, but again, historically, I do know that a number of the Windows subsystem Linux team have come from the Android project. So it's what they did first before doing WSL2. So you can see, there's probably work. I mean, I would be amazed if this hasn't already been done, and they're just simply floating the idea to say, let's make it official. I really would.
But the other thing, though, is I'm not quite sure how they could put it. It won't support, well, unless they do a deal with Google, it won't support Google Play services, which many Google Android apps that you load on your phone do depend on that.
Oh yeah, I mean it'd be fun games for licensing. You've also potentially got, and again, Gary, I'm sure you can comment here in terms of how good the animation is, but you've also got issues with the fact that apps are built for ARM. So do some apps expect some native ARM hardware in there or not? So there are some ifs and buts around there, I think.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There's stuff which definitely won't run, but there'll be a lot of stuff which does. So it's a trade-off in lots of ways.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it would be a good thing personally. I mean, we've seen the Your Phone is kind of like very much a halfway house, and that it kind of works. You can sense the potential in that once you've used a Your Phone app on Windows, and while it's got lots of problems, you can see some colossal potential there. It makes life so much easier, and really. What do most people do on Windows now, apart from Office as their main productivity app? There's probably not a lot left now, really.
It would certainly. Imagine if they could bring this to Windows 10X.
Well, I mean, Windows 10X would mean it's container-based, isn't it? So it would lend itself to it very suspiciously well.
Yes, indeed, it would.
So you could have a low-cost Windows device where Windows 10X runs Office and also runs Android apps.
Well, this is one of the things which I think you guys touched on very nicely last week, which is a low-cost Windows device, probably an ARM device, which would be nice to see some low-cost devices that could do that in a performant fashion.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
and there's no reason to think this emulation wouldn't be anything but performant, because the subsystem is pretty performant in its own right.
Oh yeah, I mean, can you imagine what it would be like if you were running this on an ARM device?
Yeah,
be very impressive, very, very impressive. In fact, in many ways, you would have at a stroke cured your whole native ARM issue.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Because that is certainly one of the major problems that the Windows ROM's got at the moment, is that it does lack native apps. And I know, as you said last week, Photoshop's arrived, or a version of Photoshop's arrived, but you've still got the issue where there's just not a lot of Windows apps, and we're in a bizarre situation where Windows and ARM is waiting for people to port stuff to Mac in such a way that they can be ported, recompiled and repointed at Windows and ARM.
Yeah, I think the situation where we are now is pretty different to where when they were looking at Project Astoria 3 or 4 years ago, and like you said, Gary said there was pushback from developers. I think we're in a different place now, and I think this time it probably wouldn't perhaps get that resistance, especially as Microsoft pushing Windows to be the best platform for developing all applications, not just Windows applications.
I'm not so sure. I mean, they have been putting a lot of effort into things like Win UI and some Windows desktop things. So I think there would still need to be a bit of a mindset shift to say, you know what, you're going to, let's not focus so much on the Windows desktop anymore, because that does still seem to be a thing. I mean, obviously, there's Xamarin and many cross-platform tools out there now, which I think would help. But I think you'd still need to have a little bit of a paradigm shift inside Microsoft to say, okay, the Windows desktop is no longer king. I don't know how much of that still lingers on. I mean, it's fading as the likes of Azure become more and more key, but I think it's still there, and one shouldn't underestimate that pushback.
Yeah, there's definitely an internal struggle to be had here.
But I think it's interesting how many problems it would solve. But let's face it, it's a long way away.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the various rumours are that it could potentially ship in the second half of 2021, which is perhaps shaping up to be a fairly big update for Windows. We might see, because I've got a feeling that will be the update for Windows next year. There might be a minor one at the beginning of next year, and then not beginning, but the first. So 21H1, I think it's going to be the minor, and 21H2 is going to be the big update with all this new UI stuff that we talked about previously and some other Windows 10 X features. So it might all ship in that late 2021 build.
Yes, I mean, I hate to sort of, kind of follow that from looking at where we are now. It's now December. We've still not seen what a 21H1 is going to look like, which we really should have seen by now if there was going to be a major release. So that does mean we shouldn't expect much for the first half of next year, which is, I think, a shame because I was quite liking that cadence that they've done for the last two years, which means if there's going to be a major release next year, it's going to have to really be towards the end of the year, because I think it's just getting too tight now to do a major update for the April-May timeframe.
Oh yeah. I mean, knowing what the impact of everything that was going on has been on the teams, I could see it in November next year. Yeah.
Yes, of course, exactly. Yeah, we should not discount the effect of the pandemic and the remote working and what have you, and the effect that and the impact that's having on the various teams inside Microsoft.
Yeah, and don't forget the rumours are that Windows 10X is where they're focusing at the moment, but keeping quiet about it, and that will ship in the first half next year. So Windows 10 itself will get some minor changes, maybe some of the UI features from 10X, and then the attention goes back to Windows 10 for the second update in 2021.
Maybe.
And we might see some of the new. I think we'll see some of these new UI features that and bits of changes that we've been trying when we were on the pre-release branch for the dev channel for Windows 10. Still not very interested on the release or the FE release build of for Windows Insiders on the dev channel, but there wasn't a build last week anyway because it was a holiday in America, so we had no build last week.
Yes, yeah, that's right. They sent out a warning and said there would be no build. So hopefully, as is the dev want, by the time this show goes out, something dramatic will have happened, because it's been many weeks where there's been nothing dramatic happening.
It really does depend if we get off that off the FE release and back to the pre-release. Then we'll see things come in. But did you see last week they did do another update for 20H2?
Yeah, that was quite a major bug. Yeah, it was quite a major bug fix. I mean, they did lots of things. Well, there were some bizarre things in there, like updating Internet Explorer's about dialogue to use the modern dialogue box. You think, wow, there's some poor person had to go into IE code there and change it. Here be dragons.
Did someone open Visual Studio? Who remembers where you saved the Internet Explorer project file? Was it on the S drive or the Z drive? I can't remember. No one.
Yes, venturing into the boneyard. It's stored just between home server and media center. There it is, just there.
Quick, fire up Visual into Dev. Let's have a go. Put in that dialog box.
Oh, show your age now.
I always like to get a Visual into Dev referencing because it is one of my core competencies on my MCSD.
So
my elective.
But there was quite.
Yeah.
But there was. Sorry, just laughing at MCSDs. Wow, I did an MCSC and MCSD. My MCSD was in Windows NT 4. Goodness me, it's going back a bit. Yeah, but there was there was an impressive array of fixes for the for 20H2, which is currently in the beta and release channel. So I guess that's going to be pushed out to release presumably patch Tuesday, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be just a little treat before Christmas. But it's good, it's good to see that being used as we expect. Things go through beta release first. I would just like to really start seeing 21H1 start to turn up in the beta channel, really.
Yeah, I think these 20H2s will be in the release preview, and then we'll start to see 21H1. But the Microsoft are changing the way that they're delivering some features, starting with the beta channel. With Windows Feature Experience Pack.
I almost heard those gears grinding there. Yeah, it's very impressive. Yeah, as he launched. Yeah, so this happened. Was it last night? I think as we're recording. This is on the 30th of November. Yeah, so they've Windows 10's been getting more and more modular anyway. We've seen bits and pieces pulled out of the core OS. Things like Edge is now gone. The Linux kernel from WS 2 is gone. They're all being shipped separately. So they seem to kind of looked at what other bits from the core OS they can start to deliver separately from the main OS. So I think in this case it's a keyboard. I think a 2-in-1 keyboard, a soft key, an on-screen keyboard, and also I think it's some modifications for the snip and screenshot tool. Is that right? I think there's those two things that have come out, and so they'll be delivered via what's known as a Windows Feature Experience Pack, which you get through Windows Update, and that means they can basically update those components separately to the core OS, which will mean they can do more updates or improve the cadence and not be tied to when the core OS gets an update. I think that's the main crux here, which I think is a good idea because it's worked really well for Edge. You see Power Toys again, that works really well as well, not being part of the core OS. So I think it's a good thing, actually. The more things that come out of the core OS, the better, really, in my mind.
Yeah, but it's something that this is something they've aimed to do for years, isn't it? I remember, probably was it even NT days where they were going to have service packs and feature packs as separate updates.
Yes, although I think perhaps what's different here is they're pulling things out of the main core OS, aren't they?
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, say NT, Vista, and before, they used to have separate, like a separate channel of stuff. So yeah, I can see it's similar.
Yeah. But I suppose what I did see some people commented and sent me messages on Twitter saying, well, this is just more fragmentation, but I don't, and confusion for users, but I don't really see it as that because these are they're not going to be optional updates. These are going to be mandatory updates that are just going to deliver features, but instead of waiting for your half-yearly build, you could get them delivered this month, next month, whenever they need to.
And also, I can't see how it's a bad thing because, as you say, they're just going to come through and be updated more frequently. But also, surely the more chaff we can take out the core inbox experience of Windows 10, the more they can focus on the rest of it, without being concerned about these things, which perhaps chaff's a cruel word to use, but stuff that's not core to Windows.
Yeah.
Mm. So I think this is going to be an interesting change to the way that they do that. They already kind of did this in some ways, and they've had many of we've had new features ship in builds and just not be switched on, and then they've switched them on at various points, haven't they? So we've kind of had that thing where you maybe not get a feature straight away, but then you get it later down the line. But we were still on the main release branch, is still tied to this twice yearly update, or a cumulative update. So this is kind of a way of delivering features through a cumulative upgrade, but like you said, it's not particularly tied to any build. So it's going to be interesting, quite interesting how they disconnected this from the underlying core OS, which is
exactly. Well, obviously we should point out this is currently Windows Insider only. It's only in the beta channel.
Yeah.
It may well move its way into the release channel at some point in the future, but right now I think they're trying out the mechanism. And I wonder if this is linked to all the various tests that we've had recently about the distribution pipeline and things. Perhaps they're doing some tinkering with that.
Yeah, they could be, but it certainly could mean that they can trial a new feature in the dev channel, because that's not tied to any specific build. They could say, oh yeah, this feature is stable, they send it to beta through this experience pack, and then they can go out to the release, and theoretically they can work quickly on that. And it's something that's worked, like for example with Edge, shipping that separate to the build of the main OS build has certainly worked on that.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll, that. So a new start menu, for example, could be worked on, and even something as major as that could be shipped independently of the build, as long as the core OS's work is done underneath, and then it means that I guess that they can service bugs and everything else much quicker as well with that. So it seems to make sense to do it. I'm almost surprised I haven't done it earlier, but I think.
Those of us that are of a certain age remember the days when Windows 10, when Windows NT was a kernel and then everything else sat on top. So.
Yeah, and hardware independent, wasn't it, as well?
And the hardware abstraction layer, all that stuff.
Yeah. In fact, most of the time that people understand about hardware extraction is when you got the HAL.sys that failed and you got the blue screen. Yeah, so I think this is good, and it was a fairly short blog post, but it's actually a fairly significant change to how they release changes to Windows 10.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
It does feel like though they're going back to what they actually promised when they first released Windows 10, that they were going to be able to do this stuff with rapid turnaround of feature releases, which sort of went by the wayside, didn't it?
Well, I guess they kind of began doing it, except they were doing it as one big OS release every 6 months, and then that worked well for maybe a year, and then it went horribly wrong. And whereas I think this approach at least means they can do the rapid iteration on the stuff that actually, whiz bang, this is fun, without actually breaking anything under the hood.
Yeah.
I suppose the only slight downside to this from a marketing point of view is you can't go, here's a brand new version of Windows, all the features are here. If they drip feed the new features out over time, it's good for an end user because we don't have to retrain, but then for the people like new things.
I mean, what is actually the point of marketing new versions of Windows these days?
Yeah, that's true.
Nobody goes out and buys a new version of Windows because they've got new features in it.
Yeah. I guess one issue that could crop up is if you are an IT manager, responsible for a fleet, you've got to verify what's on each machine and know where machines are. That could potentially be, perhaps that's where the fragmentation argument does come in. But as Garry says, no one buys Windows anymore. You don't buy it, and no one's going to ever buy an upgrade version. A very few people, who build their own machines might buy a version to install. But on the whole, you buy a PC and it comes with Windows, and that's your way of accessing the internet, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's from the IT manager's perspective. Actually, this makes a lot of sense because you can test it with your WUS server, roll it out to a small group like I do now with.
I've never heard it called WUS before. That's great. Also, WUS as well, but WUS. I'm going to call it WUS from now. That's brilliant. WUS, your WUS server, exactly.
Windows Update server. Yeah. That's one of the best things that they've done for IT departments. I think that service so much easier than individual PCs going out to the internet and grabbing the updates. But with these feature updates as well, you can you do your test group, you make sure that it's okay, and then you just roll it out because you know what release of Windows 10 they're on anyway. So it makes it easier to support. But from an excitement end user enthusiast point of view, you want to see like, oh look, this is a new version. Oh look at this, and this is new, and this is new, and this is new. But from a day job of managing a network, you won't want that. You want everybody to have the same thing all the time, consistency, and just with slight changes. So I suppose it does make sense to. Well, it's a lot better to do it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they do it anyway. So we'll see what that brings us. I guess we're going to see that probably hit the release. I suppose it'll be New Year now, won't it? It probably will be the feature set of 21H1 that goes out that way.
Could be.
And talking of updates as well, I think, Richard, you've got some data on the market share of the various installs.
Oh yeah, so I mean, obviously Microsoft doesn't publish very often where Windows is at, so we tend to rely on third parties, and one of those is AdDuplex, which they kind of run an advertising framework which is used by many Windows apps. And it gives a rough estimate of really what percentage of machines are running which version of Windows, if those machines are running apps that are part of the AdDuplex network. And so we saw in the last month, obviously, 20H2 has come out, and we've seen that suddenly grow from about 1.7% or so last month. It's now up to, it's approaching 10%. It's about 8.8%, I think, market share, which is good. Again, it's kind of the slow release, because if you look, say, a few years back in the figures, you can see the historical rate at which Microsoft used to send this stuff out. Now it's a lot slower, a lot more gradual, more cautious, which is good to see. But it did show something that was quite interesting last month, which is having declined for a while. 1909, which is obviously 2019's Windows 10, that market share actually grew last month, which was initially odd until, of course, you realise that Microsoft has been that 1903, which is the first half of 2019, that version of Windows kind of finished. It goes out of support in December. I think Microsoft may have extended it because of obviously issues around COVID-19. I think. Could be wrong there.
1809.
1809. So they have been fiddling with the end of service, but they have now, I believe, begun to force people to onto the next version. But rather than bouncing people directly to 2004, they've been pushing people onto 1909 instead.
Right.
And so that's why there's been this kind of sudden increase in market share of 1909, which is I think quite interesting because of course that's going to run out. I think is it May next year that goes end of service. May 2021.
Yeah.
So
they'll get pushed on to 20H1.
I don't know. See, this is the question. See, I mean, I don't know if you guys got a feeling on why they've done this, why they've not pushed people directly to 2004. Do you think it's compatibility or playing very cautiously? Because honestly, it's a very minor update to go from 1903 to 1909. 1909 was the first of the jumped up service pack, so all it really is a big QQ update. It's the same basic OS still, so presumably it's a relatively safe thing for them to do. Whereas going to say 2004 is quite a major jump because it's a full-on OS upgrade.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a quick update as well, isn't it? Because it is the it's just a feature update, so
that's right.
It doesn't do the full image deployment. So yeah, maybe that's why they've done it that way. It's the lightest touch to get them on a supported release.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe you're right. That's why. It's always interesting to see the usage stats on Windows 10. And I do remember when Windows 10 first came out, there was like articles of how to stop your Windows 10 from auto-updating and all that. But people were paranoid that this would be an issue. But it's over time, people just got used to the updates. And
although I mean, to be fair, it was an issue because you would suddenly find your PC being upgraded. It did happen. There's no two ways around it. Whereas after the absolute disaster that was 1809, I think Microsoft learned a lot of lessons from that. And now, of course, what it will do is it will quietly download the new update in the background, but it will prompt you to say, it's here. You can install it if you wish.
Yeah.
It's a lot until, of course, your version is going to go out of service, at which point it's going to start to force things to happen. But otherwise, it's going to be a lot more cautious and say, well, it's here. If you want it, you can have it. You can just carry on for a bit longer. It's fine. Which I think is, as I say, I think that they learned an awful lot from the experience of 1809, which was, it was as a writer, it was fantastic, but as a user, it must have been a nightmare.
with the ever famous tweets.
Yes, well, exactly. Yeah,
infamous tweets.
I think Jason did do some wonderful tweets around that because it was a very good point. It's because you basically pushed this thing out, and it's like, it'll be fine. We got all the information that we needed from from the slow ring. It's like, well, I don't think you have. And sure enough, they'd managed to sort of avoid all the issues. They're not really, the issues have been raised, and it still went through. And I mean, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall during meetings after that because something went terribly wrong inside the Windows team to allow that release to go out. And I think we've seen since it's been a much more mature, much more sensible approach to how these releases are done, and particularly, there's been a lot less playground type things where it's just you've released a stupid feature that really no one honestly cares that much about for the sake of having a presentation on stage, whereas now they're focused more on let's get a major release out, then let's make sure it works, stabilize it, and then we'll do another release. And I mean, from an enterprise standpoint, I really do like the approach that they've taken of late. Obviously, from the Intel world, I think the ARM world is a different matter, but I think the Intel world, they've done a good job in the last 2 years.
Yeah, you're right. And talking of ARM as well, it's something we talked with Jeremy last week. I know you asked me the question, what's happened to the x86 simulation for ARM? We promised it for November, and Jeremy's eagerly waiting for it, as he mentioned last week. He's dying to test this out. And there's still no sign of it yet. I think they mentioned November. which is why they never mention dates, because when they do, we always say, you said November.
Well, exactly. And that's why when they do say it, and this was like Panos Panay when he announced it, was because, I mean, a little while ago, it was looking like that they were never going to do it. It was just technically not possible, or it was just proving too difficult to do. So I think they'd almost decided that they weren't going to try and do it, and then they obviously did, and unfortunately they did give a date, which was end of November, and so we sat and we waited, and then we saw the announcement there'd be no more builds until after Thanksgiving, and thought, well, that's going to make it a bit tight then. And sure enough, it's now December and it's not arrived yet, which I think it means they're making sure that what they release is going to actually work. I just think they shouldn't commit. They shouldn't say a date and then let people down.
Yeah.
And say nothing.
Yeah, that's I'm hoping that we're going to get switched back to the pre-release branch, and it'll be in there, and then Jeremy will be happy, and we'll all be able to test it for anyone that's got a Surface Pro X at least.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's 3 people.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeremy.
Uncle Jeremy.
No, I mean, the thing is, last week Jeremy made some really good points. The Pro X, particularly the latest incarnation, is a really good bit of kit. But what we're lacking at the moment, I think, is the lower end, the cheaper ARM experiences. So you've got the Ferrari in the Pro X. You also need to have the simpler, cheaper ARM-based machines as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely, would like to see that, and another look at some of the budget devices and see some of the manufacturers build them. So not a Surface, even an ARM-powered Surface Go, which is something we've thought would be here perhaps this year, but we'd like to see that, or even someone else like HP or someone else, or Acer,
exactly.
Even when the budget ones.
I mean, exactly. Samsung made a really good device, but unfortunately, it's still at the premium end. So yeah, so I mean, Acer would seem to be the company that could churn one out at a much lower price point. But again, as you said last week, even the Chromebooks are starting to ramp up in price and tech wise. So. It's just the danger is when you do put such a high premium on that price, you've got to make sure the experiences can justify it.
Yeah. Hopefully that's the thing that will. I think we'll have a show looking in January. We'll have our look forward type show, and I think that's things we'll be looking for next year is ARM devices other than the Surface Pro X, something at a different at the other ends at the price range. Now I know that this wasn't quite what we chatted briefly offline about this before, but Richard, you had a story about productivity score and backpedaling.
Oh yeah,
I wanted to get your take on this.
Oh, productivity score. Oh, this has been it's been a very interesting week in the enterprise world. Yeah, so I've got to tell you a story, and we have to go back a few months, because back in, it must have been May. I had a talk with Brad Anderson, who's the Microsoft VP for, I think, experiences and things, and Microsoft 365, and Melissa Grant, who's in charge of the product marketing. And it was about this thing called productivity score. And it was being pitched as a way you can kind of score your organization for its productivity. You can see how well things are. Brad Anderson is very keen on things like boot times and hardware dragging things down, because he gets very annoyed when people moan about Windows being very slow or taking a while to boot, when really it's down to the fact that the machine's running an old spinning disk, or maybe it's got so much rubbish being loaded that it takes Windows forever to grind it to life. So that's kind of where he was going with that. So we had a chat about this, and talking through, he's like, well, crikey, you're looking at what everyone's doing and how low can this go? And at the time I said, well, you can go very low, but we're not, this is not about tracking what users are doing, it's about scoring the organization. So fine. We now fast forward to the release of it, which was, it went out of preview, I think, at the end of October. And it transpired that it was going down to an individual level, and a video was released. I think Jared Spataro presented it, and it showed productivity score, and it showed you being able to drill down and see what individual users were actually doing. And of course, the thinking about this was great. You can see where people need help. You can see what people are working on. Are they spending too much time in meetings? Are they using messaging when they should be using email? Or using email when they should be using messaging? It's all spun in a very positive way. But obviously, privacy campaigners began to look at it and say, wait a minute, this looks a little bit scary, what you're doing here. But of course, the thing is, yes, it is alarming to see the data presented in that way, but we should be clear. Microsoft 365 captures this stuff anyway. It's telemetry. It's always been in it. It's part of the Microsoft graph. You know, the APIs are there. You can look at the people APIs. I'm sure, Garry, you've seen the APIs. It's all there. So all the productivity score stuff was doing was presenting it. But the problem was they were so keen to say it's at an organization level, and yet what they were showing was clearly going down to the individual level, and that was a little bit, it got a bit icky. So today we had a huge, well, I hesitate to use the word backpedaling, but there was a blog post where they said, no, it really is at an organization level, to the point where they said, we're going to take out the bits that are showing you the individual stuff, we're going to put all that out and focus purely on what, to be fair, Brad Anderson said right at the start, which was focusing on where your enterprise, your company is being productive. So looking at what's slowing you down, where your bottlenecks are, how things are being used, not at an individual level. But of course, in many ways, the genie is a bit out of the bottle now, that people perhaps may now realise just what is being captured about them and what's lurking beneath the surface. Although, to be completely clear, productivity score, as it's now being presented, is working at an organisational level. It was just an amusing sort of, it was an amusing few days of toing and froing to get to that point.
Yeah, I suppose it would actually. I would be quite interested to see some stats. I mean, I get stats from our internal help desk software at work, so I can see like response times and that kind of thing and usage. So it's a kind of extension of that, and there's no privacy concerns with that, because that's a metric that many companies use. But I guess when it's taken out to email and scaled up like that, then it does.
Well, absolutely. But again, the key thing is even back when it was first being mooted in May, one of the key points was obviously you need to be aware of what you're allowed to do in your country, because some countries won't allow you to even do that. So you can turn things on and off. So the thinking was, I mean, it's one of those things where Microsoft has provided the tools, the data's there, it's what you do with it. And so the concern was some companies may perhaps be less than nice with what's in there. And I mean, one particular example was, I think they said at the time, they had been asked, if there was a way of using it to see what employees had logged in when, and if they were working. And the answer was, well, it's there, but we're not in the business of doing that. So yeah, but I think if you use it in the way it's intended, which is it's going to go up from the level you described, Ian, and it looks at how your machines are connected, where the network bottlenecks are, where the hardware bottlenecks are. I think from that point of view, it does make a lot of sense. It's just, unfortunately, that was drowned out a bit by the noise of people being concerned about the individual access, which of course is not what it's about, but that made a lot of noise. And so it's unfortunate, really.
Almost as much noise as sidewalks made for Amazon.
Yeah, well, sidewalk. Yeah, it's drowned out sidewalk, isn't it? Sidewalk. I'll leave that one to you, Garry. I'm going nowhere near sidewalk.
I mean, in principle, sidewalk's a great idea, except for the privacy side of things, which everybody's clamped down on very quickly.
Goodness me, yeah, it's I mean,
sidewalk is a kind of Wi-Fi sharing mechanism.
It is, yeah. I mean, the idea is basically allows for low energy devices which can be then tracked using the sidewalk Wi-Fi, which and it's basically for things like tracking your dog or your children as they run around down the street.
Like a tile or something.
Yeah, like a tile. But the idea is that it then uses this set of networks which are all Amazon devices link onto this. So if you imagine how many Amazon devices are out there, you'd be able to track something fairly easily with this. It's sure to be near somebody's house who's got an Amazon device and sharing a bit of their network. Obviously, the whole thing then goes up, but you're sharing your network with all these people and you've got no control over it, and you don't really know what Amazon are doing with it, and it's turned on by default, which is where suddenly this massive privacy thing came up, and lots of people have been sort of very, very, very vehemently saying turn it off immediately, and having goes at Amazon for having it enabled by default.
I mean, I mean, with all of these things, be it Microsoft 365, be it the Amazon devices, be it the Google devices, be it your smartphones. If you've got one, you've given up a level of privacy already. You just have to accept that, surely.
Yeah, surely, yeah. And I think it's not. I don't think it's the privacy side in terms of the privacy of the device. It's the fact that you're then opening up your Wi-Fi network to other devices, and there's a whole security aspect of that. And some of the security experts have said that they don't trust this without knowing exactly how it works to not open up backdoors for hackers to get into your own systems very easily. No, I don't know. I mean, it's a challenging one to actually take, because I can certainly see advantages of it if you've got a network which is pan domestic, so it goes beyond where you live, and you can actually do things like tracking of that. There's some definite advantages to that, but there is definitely also a security risk and a lack of transparency here. And also, of course, it's Amazon, so you just don't know what they're going to do with that data. So I think it's a reasonable thing to say that there are concerns about it. I think if Amazon had come out with a bit more clarity on what it's actually doing, actually maybe opened up how it's actually working a bit more. The danger of that, though, of course, is that lends these vectors for hackers to get in because they don't know how it works. So it's a tricky one. But obviously, I mean, the main concern here is obviously that you're sharing a bit of your Wi-Fi, which is then not protected by any of your security mechanisms. It's only protected by whatever Amazon put out in place. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting idea. I mean, I could certainly see a massive case in America if something did happen and so someone did get hacked through it. I dare say Amazon have put a lot of security aspects into place because of that very fact.
Yeah.
It's just that things can go on your network then necessarily that you haven't authenticated.
Yeah, you had no idea, and you have no idea they're on your network either. It's actually, I mean, it's not really on your network. It's on a sort of shared bit of bandwidth, which isn't. It's almost like a bit a VPN type of arrangement, effectively. But isn't
there liability issues about using bandwidth? So certainly in UK, if you hop on somebody else's network and then you do something on their bandwidth or their connection.
Oh yeah. You've got loads of potential issues here.
Yeah.
I mean, Amazon are saying they couldn't use it for browsing. They couldn't use it for anything other than the sidewalk side of things, which is an interesting. I mean, if that's the case, they should explain why that's the case, which I don't think they have properly yet. I mean, from a smart home perspective, there's a lot of potential really useful things you could do with this, but I mean, certainly it would allow for location triggering to be quite interesting. You could actually have things trigger as you approach the home because you'd know you're on neighbours' networks and things like that. So there's a lot of potential advantages to it, and also it makes a lot of sense doing it on Amazon devices because they're just so pervasive.
The phrase "you're on neighbours' networks" has just set alarm bells off all around the country.
I just dropped my camera as well. That was so dramatic.
I thought you'd been attacked then by somebody, one of your neighbours' Wi-Fi. Yeah. I mean, from a feature perspective, that is quite good, isn't it? Because like you said, your device is like 2 miles, 1 mile. Half a mile, and you could do all sorts of things like that. That's not necessarily tied to GPS on your phone. Yeah.
And it means you're using potentially a lot less power to do this as well because because of the way the system works. I mean, I think the mistake possibly here is Amazon saying they're going to use your Wi-Fi. They could have done this quite easily with some form of Bluetooth or whatever within the devices. Using a high-power Bluetooth chip in the new Echoes potentially, because they've got Bluetooth Smart in the new Echoes. So, but they wanted to do it for all the existing devices because this basically works on a device. Now, I should say this is only happening in America. Don't worry, panic if you're in Europe or in the UK. It's not happening in the UK. I think they would have a lot of problems doing it in Europe or UK.
Yeah.
Not least they'd have to rename it as Pavement.
Yeah. Yeah. But obviously it's been a massive thing this last week or so. So if anybody's seen the fuss about sidewalk, that's the reason why.
Yeah, it's like anything. You compromise. There's always a compromise between features and privacy. The more like you said earlier, but the more privacy you have, the less features you get. And every time you enable something like GPS or tracking or anything like that, you're losing a layer of privacy every time. And it's whether you can live with that compromise. And the amount of privacy we have now compared to 20 years ago is, well, it's nothing. You know, you're virtually tracked already, aren't you? 24/7 with your phones. Well, you are, but not virtually. You are tracked unless you turn off things, you know. But it's the third party devices, the little things like you could have. You know, if you lose your laptop or you can put smart tags on things, or your kids have got little tags on them, all sorts of things. You know, there's a lot of options, and I guess, but it was a controversial. Certainly was controversial in the States. And talking of Alexas, I did a video. I know we talked about this a while ago, but I spent a bit more time with the Amazon app the Alexa app for Windows 10.
Mm-hmm.
When initially launched, it was very basic, and you could do virtually nothing on it. But I don't know if you've tried out this version that was updated probably about 2 months ago, and I found it to be really good. You can see I've got it on the screen here, but I was doing some testing with it for the smart home stuff, and it can do everything that the phone version does now, including voice recognition, using the trigger word from the lock screen. Just as you, so really, if you haven't got one of the Amazon devices in your room where you are, you can use your PC as that. But it's also got the button interface that if you want to turn your lights on and off, and smart plugs and thermostats and all that, it's all there. And it's all the routines are in there, and the skills and everything. It does the drop in and for voice calls and everything. So I was really impressed how rich this is compared to the app of the previous app which was really basic. This is a lot better now, and you can use your PC as a Amazon device.
Yeah.
So I recorded a video of that anyway, so showing how to use that and some of the steps, but really straightforward. And you can turn your Christmas tree lights on and off as much as you want now from Windows 10.
Yeah, I think, but the only thing it doesn't do at the moment is routines. You can't set routines up in it, but
you can't set them. No, but I think you can trigger them, but you can't set them.
Yeah.
So I quite like that. So I thought
no, it's definitely a huge improvement. And the communication side of it is a huge improvement.
The video calling. I guess this is video calling and sharing is one of the battlegrounds for the technology companies for this year and probably next year as well. I think Teams is currently free to use, isn't it, for unlimited calling with just a Microsoft account now. You don't have to have an Office 365 account. And Zoom, I think, extended theirs for this week, or next week or something like that, for 24-hour calling. So Amazon's got that with the drop-in on their devices, which you can do through there as well.
Yeah, I think the drop-in stuff in-house is as the sort of the in-house intercom side is really good, and adding the laptop in or whatever into that has been an option. This is particularly powerful, actually. I think
it can replace the bells, the servants' bells that Richard has in his mansion.
Yes, I mean you may laugh, but drop-in it's actually achieved some acceptance in the speed household now, whereas most of the Amazon devices have been rejected soundly. Drop-in is proving to be quite useful.
Yeah, it is actually very good because it saves me shouting from the bottom of the stairs to get everybody to come down for the meal.
Well, I mean, in all seriousness, because I now work in my shed at the end of my garden, because obviously no one's allowed to go in the office anymore. So the device is in my shed, and so people can shout at me from the house without to wander out in the rain, or call my mobile. So it works really well.
I wonder how long it's been before we have group drop-in, because that would be really useful. If you could actually drop in on all the devices in the house, all dropped in together, then you just leave them on all the time, so you could always chat between rooms without shouting at each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, not sure I want to do that. Privacy. I've got privacy concerns on that one. Yeah, give that one a miss. Another video I did this week as well is I've been wanting to test this for a while. Is the Xbox game streaming to Android, and I tried it with the Duo because I tried it in the past with Android, and when you've got it on the phone, I always find it really hard to hold your phone, hold your Xbox controller. It doesn't work well. But with the Duo's laptop form factor, well, in the laptop mode on a desk, it works really well. So I managed to sit up here in my office and play Forza Horizon on the Duo with an Xbox controller, and it worked perfectly. No stuttering. Last time I tried this, it was pretty bad, but they've done a lot of work, and I know it's not xCloud because this is on my local Xbox, but it still works really well. So I can see why xCloud is going to work well. But even just on your local network, it's a very good experience now. So simple to set up, and yeah, something like the Duo with the propped up screen works really well. So if you haven't tried Android on Android phone game streaming from Xbox, give it a try because it works really well. You don't have to pair your controller up to your phone. You can use the controller that's paired directly to the Xbox if you want. But I found it quite good because if you sat in the evening watching TV and you want to do something on your Xbox, you may not want to turn the rest of the family are watching TV. You don't want to turn the Xbox off. You don't want to go to another room. You can just stream it to your phone. It works quite well. I'm amazed that there isn't that streaming application directly to Windows 10, but I thought there used to be, but I don't know whether it's there anymore.
If only there was an Android application. If Windows 10 could run out Android apps, that'd solve everything, wouldn't it?
That's a solution. And that takes us right back to where we started.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I did a video of that, and you can see that in action on the Duo, and you see it works quite well. So I'm quite pleased with that. Another gaming thing that I know, Richard, you wanted to mention before we finished tonight is Flight Sim 2020 coming to VR.
Yes, this is great. Well, obviously, I'm a little bit biased here because I do like Flight Sim 2020. I don't have a machine that can do it justice, but I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful game because I've always liked Flight Sims. And when it came out, I think was it back in July, they were saying what VR. They'd be doing a VR version at some point, but it was looking like it would only be the Reverb, the HP Reverb G2, I think, at the time. Yeah. But I think it's reported on the website Polygon. It looks like as part of the December 23rd Sim Update 2, they're going to be making VR available for, well, they say pretty much everyone. I mean, we'll see what that actually means in practice, but that means, in theory, Oculus and Vive, as well as Windows mixed reality. So that's great for the community. Perhaps a shame for the Windows mixed reality people who were hoping for a killer app, because I think Flight Sim 2020 in VR will be almost a killer app for if you're a Flight Sim nerd. It's going to look amazing.
Microsoft don't seem to do that killer app thing anymore, do they? Now they seem to want to go where the
yeah.
They just go like with the Android apps and iOS apps. They go where people are. So
yes, I think you're right. I mean, it's good. Although I hate to, as I said, I'm running a Rift and a Quest 2, and it obviously won't be running on the Quest 2 unless it's plugged into my PC. Because I doubt the Quest 2's got quite a horsepower to run Flight Sim 2020. But as you say, they're clearly going where the market is. I think it's a shame maybe that there's no Xbox Series X version out yet of FS 2020, because I would be intrigued to see what that Xbox Series X hardware looks like with the something like Flight Sim 2020.
I'm really tempted to give it a try. I don't know how well my 1060 gaming laptop would do with it.
I think it'll be fine because I'm running it on a 1050, I think, Ti.
Right.
And it runs fine. I mean, I don't run it at the highest resolution with all settings turned up, but it's more than acceptable for me. So yeah, I mean, it's people seem to say you have to have the incredible powerful 3000 series NVIDIA graphics cards, but not my experience. I can make it. I mean, I'm sure it would look a lot nicer. Don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't let that put me off using it. And of course, it's expensive. But again, if you're using Xbox Game Pass, it comes as part of the bundle. So you might as well try it.
Yeah, I might have a look at that. Maybe it's something when I've had some time off over Christmas. I guess it's one of those things, though, you really need a bit of time to play with it as well. And
you
really
do, you do, and you've got to really have. I mean, I'm using an Xbox controller, but I know that at some point I'm going to have to bite the bullet and get a yoke because it's it does get. There's a lot of controls. As you progress through the lessons, you have to do more and more things. You start to press buttons. I need a controller that's going to actually do what I need to fly an aircraft. So, but certainly, I'm still blown away by the sheer detail and fidelity when I'm flying around my local town, for example. It's very, very strange to see. Oh, it's my house down there. It's very, very detailed.
Yeah, I think I might have to. You're tempting me. I might look at it when I've got some time off.
Well, exactly. I mean, I would say be aware. It's a massive download. It's about 96 gigs. So allow yourself a day.
Yeah, and it's not going to fit on my C drive.
No, I've actually had to invest in a new SSD for my PC, and I was again vaguely shocked at how cheap 1 terabyte SSDs have got these days. It was about £80, I think, on the recent sale day, and that's a terabyte SSD from a well-known brand. And I think certainly with the current batch of PC games, you do really have to play them now on SSD because it's just too slow on swing discs.
Yeah, I might have to do something with that as well. Something else for me to do.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that's everything I've got for this week. Garry, where can we find you and
you can find
your latest EV stuff?
You can find me, all over the place, but find me on Twitter at Garry WMA, and you can also find links to my iPace Owner YouTube channel, and also Fascinating Tech. And we're due to get the Christmas gift guide out hopefully next week. It's had a few issues, mainly with people. Some of the companies who are sending us review equipment got hit by the dreaded pandemic, so it's been a bit delayed, but it's hopefully coming out next week.
Excellent. And Richard, where can we find you?
You can mostly find me on Twitter at Richard_Speed.
Excellent. Well, we should be back same time, same place next week. You can email me in at thislifestyle.com at iStixon on Twitter. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.
Cheerio.